So the Houston Rockets are a mess. I know they won today, and that puts them at 2-2 for the season. But this team has an obvious ceiling, and that ceiling is probably like a 6 seed, 7th seed in the West. You know, they're really not going anywhere. And more importantly, James Harden wants out. So I just wanted to put my GM hat on for a little bit and talk about what moves they can make, and specifically some moves that I haven't heard of yet on NBA Twitter and YouTube, and you get it. And I've heard Ben Simmons. Lately we've been hearing a lot of Jaylen Brown, but I think their real home run move that Houston can make is trying to get a high draft pick in the 2022 NBA draft. Because the 2022 NBA draft is a year that that NBA is looking to change the rule about high schoolers jumping straight to the NBA. And if that, I would have to imagine they are going to change the rule that year, just because, you know, the current leadership in the NBA and Adam Silver is pretty progressive, and they've been talking about this for a while, and the current CBA that makes it so they have to be a year removed from high school is going to run out by then. And I just feel like it's highly likely that 2022 will be the first draft class with high schoolers in it since, you know, back in 2005 or whenever they stopped doing that. And if that's the case, that means this draft is going to be loaded with Amani Bates, who is going to be basically a smaller Kevin Durant, perhaps. Who knows? He might grow. I mean, the dude's super tall already, and he's 16, so he might grow another 3-4 inches. Victor Wembanyama, who is probably the number one rated prospect in the entire world right now. He's a 7'3", 16-year-old from France, who if you guys are real diehard basketball fans, you might have seen the video of him beating Rudy Gobert one-on-one. And this dude is, I don't want to jump the gun on him, but I think he should definitely be the number one prospect in this draft. He could be like a generational talent because he can shoot, he can handle the ball, he can pass, he's an elite rim protector. In those World Cup games, those like under 18 and under 16 games, the dude's averaging like 7 blocks and like not a lot of minutes played. He can't play a whole lot of minutes now because he is still really young and growing so much. Like, obviously they need to put weight on him, and injury is a concern. But in the minutes that he does play, he is absolutely dominant, and he is dominating players older than him, stronger than him, not bigger than him. Nobody's bigger than him. But yeah, he can already compete with NBA guys, and he hasn't even grown into his body yet. You also have Chet Holmgren coming out of that draft, and Chet Holmgren is definitely going to be in this draft. He's the 7-foot white KD, essentially. I've already made 2 KD comparisons. I know that's like a cardinal sin in drafting, but fuck it, guys. This is what we're doing today. Chet Holmgren, he's listed as a center, but if you guys saw him and Amani Bates play on that ESPN Showcase game, he's much more of like a 2-guard, honestly. He can score at every level. He's a dominant rim protector. He's very mobile. His change of direction speed is really fast. And that's another guy that would be a number 1 pick most years. Jaden Hardy is another guy coming up in that draft whose player comparison is oddly enough James Harden. Patrick Baldwin Jr. is like a 6'10" small forward who has Michael Porter Jr. as his player comparison. And, you know, we all assume Michael Porter Jr., the sky is the limit for him. And Paulo Banchero is another guy who's getting Chris Webber comparisons. Jabari Smith is going to be a high draft pick that year. Adrian Griffin Jr. And all those guys, I believe I just listed 7 guys, would have gone number 1 in this 2020 draft that we have right now. So, assuming that rule changes, 2022 it might be the most loaded draft class ever. So most teams are not going to give up their picks that year very easily. But Houston has something to offer that most teams do not have to offer, and that's James Harden, who is a top 6, 7, 5, whatever player in the league. And I would think most GMs would be willing to part with a high draft pick that year if they can get James Harden. Now, obviously, that is going to be that we have the 2021 draft coming up, and then there would be the draft after that. So if you're the Houston Rockets, you're going to have to predict who's going to be bad next season. So that'd be teams like, you know, perhaps the Wizards if they lose Bradley Beal. Obviously, the Knicks are just always bad. You know, Minnesota could be bad. Sacramento. the Magic, I can see them falling off. So there's teams out there who are probably, that we could probably predict are not going to be good and are going to get lottery picks in the 2022 draft. But you can't trade James Harden to that team, because if James Harden is on that team, then that team probably isn't bad, and that 2022 draft pick isn't as great as you want. So you're going to have to get a third team involved. So the trade would look like Houston getting that 2022 pick, and they'll probably try to get another pick too, because you're trading James Harden. You want to trade James Harden for more than one pick. But they'll get the 2022 pick coming to Houston. James Harden will go to probably some contender, and whatever package that contender was going to give Houston, that package is now going to go to the shitty team that's trading the 2022 pick. And you would hope that that package going to the shitty team is mostly picks, so that shitty team doesn't get good by then. So it would be a crazy trade that Houston would have to be the architects of. But they're in a crazy situation. They have to trade a generational talent. They have to trade somebody who's probably the second best Houston Rocket in the history of that franchise. And that's a pretty storied franchise. That franchise has been around for a long time. So they got to get something for it. They got to get a star, like an absolute star player back for James Harden, or else it would be a failure of a trade for them. So that should definitely be Houston's like ace in the hole kind of trade that they have in the back of their minds right now. Especially if they can't get Ben Simmons, because Ben Simmons is probably the most realistic, solid asset that they can get back for James Harden. Obviously, the Daryl Morey connection in Philly, and the awkward fit between Embiid and Simmons, and I think a fit between Embiid and Harden would be a lot smoother on the court. Another destination where Harden could end up is Boston, which personally, I would not make that trade if I was Boston, but we're making this video from Houston's perspective. Houston would have to try to get Jaylen Brown in that deal, because then I think you'll have your core of John Wall, Christian Wood, and Jaylen Brown, which is not great, but it's something. I would say Jaylen Brown probably has Jimmy Butler-ish potential to his game, just a big forward who is a lot stronger than everybody who's going to be guarding him, and recently he has really improved his scoring out of the mid-post and the mid-range and his ball handling. And I've just been really impressed with Jaylen Brown's career trajectory, because when he came into the league, he was kind of a 3-and-D guy who didn't shoot the three that great, and he's really become an all-around player. And I like guys like that. I like guys that have proven that they've put in the work and they've expanded their game to heights that we didn't even see possible when they were drafted. Now, that being said, that's the exact reason why I think Boston wouldn't trade Jaylen Brown. But hey, that's what you got to try to get if you're Houston. Any other pick, I don't think the Nets really have anything to offer to Houston. And I doubt the Nets are going to make the same mistake and trade all their picks again just to get James Harden on that team of like already a bunch of alpha personalities. I don't see it happening. I really can't imagine that, and I can't imagine KD letting that happen, honestly. So I don't really picture many other teams outside of Boston, Philly, being that viable of an option for James Harden's landing spot, just because James Harden is such a massive asset to move, whether it's in the offseason, midseason, whatever. It's the contract, it's the style of play, it's the attention that he demands. So with all that in mind, I can only really picture him on a couple teams. Now, some dark horses that Houston could call up, this would probably be like plan C for them, but I think they should give New Orleans a call, because New Orleans has all those picks from the Anthony Davis trade. They should give Oklahoma City a call, even though Oklahoma City has just screwed them over in the Chris Paul Westbrook trade. OKC does have a million picks, and they're going to have to trade them eventually, because they cannot draft that many players, or else they'll just have to start cutting the people that they draft. But I don't know if those picks are really going to be that great. The Clippers just re-signed Paul George. Obviously, the big one is Kawhi. If Kawhi re-signs with the Clippers, those picks are probably in the 20s. And who else did they get picks from? Oh, they have Houston's picks. Well, shit. Maybe they should try to get their own picks back from OKC. So yeah, OKC, New Orleans, those are two dark horse candidates, or just people that Houston's going to have to make phone calls to.